Thank you. Welcome, everyone. One of the things we've learned in COVID is it's much better to have music while we're waiting. So I hope you all were doing a little dance and in your chairs or wherever you are in your kitchens. It is so wonderful to be with you all today. This has been so long coming, and we're thrilled that we're finally here. I'm the Reverend Jessie Gutzel Dodson, and I am one of the priests at St. Paul's Episcopal in Cleveland Heights. And about 2 years ago, we started wanting to host Austin Channing Brown, knowing that you, Austin, have local roots, as you were saying in the chat, and having read your book, and it spread through our congregation how important it was and how much we enjoyed it. So glad that this worked out. And as we finally worked it out that you were able to come, we decided that our conversation would be enhanced by making it just beyond our own congregation. And so we have invited 4 other churches right around the area, all of which may have familiar names to you. I don't know. But so the people here represented are congregants from St. Paul's, from Fairmount Presbyterian, which is just across the street from us, from St. Mark's Presbyterian, Church of the Saviour, United Methodist, and Plymouth UCC. And representatives from each of these congregations have come together to talk about today and plan it. And we decided to have book groups to make it really more relational, so that we're not just coming. Once you had, through your agency, asked us to make it a conversation, we're like, you know what, that's a good idea. And so we've had about 125, 130 people participate reading your book, and of all different congregations. It's been awesome, co-led by different facilitators from each congregation. So this is a well-read group and eager to talk to you. And so our hope really is that we build relationships through this. So for those of you tuning in, just what to expect today, we'll be here till 5:30. And this, like I said, is going to be a conversation all throughout. So we're going to start out by some questions from our planning committee, and I'll introduce those moderators shortly. And then we'll shift to audience Q&A. So at the bottom of your screen, there's a little box that says Q&A. And you can ask a question, and please, some of you have already started, you can use that throughout. Also, please use the chat to respond and talk, and really, we can all be communicating throughout this. So please do use that. So before we jump in, I just want to say a word of introduction for our moderators, who you'll see pop up momentarily. So the first is the Reverend Carmen Cox Harwell, who is senior pastor at St. Mark's Presbyterian. And there she is, hi. And in addition to leading her church, Reverend Carmen serves as a liaison to the Beechwood Police Department and as a participant with God Before Guns, a community activist group, and Greater Cleveland Congregations, which is our local interfaith community organization. And then secondly, you'll see Carl Hoffman, who is a member of Fairmount Presbyterian here in Cleveland Heights. And prior to his retirement, Carl taught English at our local girls' school, Hathaway Brown, for many years. And he has been one of our co-facilitators for our book groups on your book. And then finally, later in the time, we will see Amanda Mosing, who's serving as a pastor of discipleship at Church of the Saviour, UMC. And she coordinates small group ministries there, as well as assisting with worship leadership. So, and I just got a message in the chat. So saying we only see Austin and Jessie. That is by design. So you are seeing exactly what you should be seeing right now. And we have us spotlit so you can see us. And Christine Winters will be working some tech in the background. If you have any issues, please do use the chat, and we'll hopefully answer tech questions that come up. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Reverend Matt Bayhoff, who will give a word of introduction to Austin. So thank you all so much for being here, and I'll see you a little later in the hour.
Hello, everyone. It is my great privilege to introduce once again someone who you have been aware of for a little bit now, hopefully. Austin Channing Brown is joining us for this conversation today. As many of you know, she wrote the book, I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. Reading the book was not a prerequisite to come to our conversation today, but I encourage you, if you did not read it, to take time and read it. It is wonderful, and I think very important conversation, as you'll see today. But you'll see as she goes on today, her workshops and lectures and her conversations, that she has this wonderful mix of just fun, disarming, and transformative. She uses her humor and pop culture and storytelling to engage her audience, which I think does wonderful in these conversations about the realities of systemic racism and the everyday actions which allow racism to thrive in our world. You'll see that she evokes thought, feeling, and action as she celebrates Blackness and the possibility of justice in our organizations and our communities. Recently, as a media producer, Austin creates content that centers around the experience of Black women and dismantling the foundations of white supremacy. Her nationally celebrated first season of The Next Question. Side note, if I encourage you to check it out, just Google The Next Question. I think there's 8 episodes in the first series, is that correct? I have started, I have not finished it, but it has been some great enjoyment listening to this this past week, listening to some of the conversations there. But they had on it MacArthur genius Nicole Hannah-Jones, New York Times bestseller Brene Brown, and Jasmine Guillory. And her co-producers, she does this alongside of her co-producers, Chi-Chi Okowu and Jenny Booth Potter. So it's just been I encourage you to check it out, but this is all to say we are very excited to have her with us today. We are thrilled you're here and you've agreed to participate in this conversation with our churches. So thank you for being here. And now I am going to hand it over to Carmen and to Carl as they begin this conversation.
Good afternoon again, Sister Austin. It's really good to have you with us. Everybody's going to be telling you that because it's true. So let me begin with the question that I am asked to moderate. Considering when you first wrote your book, I'm Still Here, that was in 2018. We live in a different world today since 2018. So I guess my question to you is, are you considering an addendum to your book? Maybe something that will speak to, not only what you've already mentioned in I'm Still Here, but since then, what has transpired? Are you seeing any changes, any positive changes since the time that you initially wrote that book until now?
Yeah. So so for any of you who have been in the publishing world, you know that publishing takes a long time. And so I actually wrote I'm Still Here in 2016, 2017, and then it released in 2018. And so I think what is both troubling and fascinating about the book is that in some respects, it is more popular now in 2021 than it was when it released in 2018. And as an author, that's, personal achievement, right? To have written a book that feels evergreen. But it's also deeply problematic that the issue of racial justice has more or less remained unchanged since I wrote it in 2016. I honestly feel great about the book itself. I don't feel the need to add anything to it. But I also don't think that I'm done, So I think there will be more writings. I think there could be another book of essays. I think there could be another, season of The Next Question. I don't think I'm done producing content. But I have to admit that I do feel like I'm Still Here is complete. Like she was exactly what she was supposed to be, and continues to speak to the nation.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Let's turn it over to Carl.
Hi, Austin. It's so nice to have you. We've been working quite a while to get you here, and it's just beautiful to see your face smiling at us.
Oh, I'm so glad you kept trying.
Okay, my question is about, actually there's a statement I'm going to make, and then there's some questions which follow it.
Great.
Here's the statement. Throughout the course of US history, white people have tended to have a hands-off approach doing justice work on behalf of people of color. Recently and rightly, there has been more discussion about how justice work should be performed by larger numbers of white people. Your book surveys some of the difficulties that can be encountered when this happens. And first question is, as we think about this, do you have any advice for how white people should take this responsibility of a larger role in justice work while avoiding becoming white saviors?
Oh, I love this question. Yeah. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that I'm answering this question as a Black woman, as someone who has never experienced whiteness, right? And so I think this is an important conversation to have among white people, to have among white abolitionists, white freedom fighters, white people who have been in this work for some time, because I do think the process is not the same, right? What a white person experiences in their pursuit of justice is different from what I experience in my pursuit of justice. So I just want to acknowledge that I am answering this question as someone who has been watching white people, right? Not as someone who is white and has been doing that particular work. Does that make sense, Carl?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, great. So as a person of color, right, who is like, do I have any white allies? Like, where are they? Where are they? Right? And as someone who is assessing, are you an ally? Are you an advocate? There are a couple things that I know that I personally am always on the lookout for. And one of them is for white allies to realize that I am not the work of racial justice, right? So we can be friends and we can hang out, but know that after we have gone and had coffee together, you still haven't done anything for racial justice, right? Because I am not the work.
Thank you so much. That's a good way of putting it.
Right? And I think in a larger systemic sense, it's important for white people to realize that people of color, Black people, Hispanic people, Asian people are not the work, right? So it is not the case that there is something wrong with the Black community, with Black culture that needs to be fixed, and then everything would be okay, right? So what we don't want to do as justice seekers is, I'll be extreme here, is go into the hood, right? And tell all the Black men that they should just pull up their pants and then they would be treated better by police. You know what I mean? And I know we all know that's ridiculous, right? But we also hear those things from people, right? And if we can name the crux of what's happening there, right? It's an assumption that the Black community is the work, right? That there is something wrong with Blackness, that there is something wrong with the hood, that there is something wrong with Black women, there is something wrong with Black teenagers, right? And they are the work of racial justice. And that's not so, right? You will do a world of good as a white person if you can just remember that the system is what is problematic, not the people.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I like that way of boiling it down.
Mm-hmm.
Second question. Do you have any advice for white allies who want to work in harmony with Black, Indigenous, and people of color?
Oh, so many things. So many things, friends. You know, from what I can tell, right? I don't know that I have the right verb for this, but releasing, undermining, taking apart, forsaking white supremacy is an ongoing process, right? It's an ongoing journey. At no point have I met a white person who is like, done, finished, right? I've accomplished this. I've been set free from white supremacy, right? I don't know anybody who has had that experience, right? It is an ongoing process. And so I think inside of that process then, right, is this constant undoing of the assumption that white people know better, that white people have the answers, that white people understand the situation, that white people know how to solve the problem, right? And white allies have to always be on the lookout for whether or not white supremacy has reared its ugly head, even inside of a process to try to do better, right? So when you're sitting in that community meeting, when you're sitting in the boardroom, when you're sitting right in these places where the justice work is happening, are you still tempted, right, to become the person who knows everything, the person who knows what to do, the person who is condescending to other white people, or the person who's condescending to people of color, right? That as an ally, you have to be on the lookout constantly for the controlling nature of white supremacy, right? And you have to be willing to constantly lay it down, lay it down, lay it down. That what you are doing is following the lead of the most marginalized among us. You are believing what they declare as their own path for freedom. And you are working towards that freedom in ways that the community that you're in have deemed appropriate for you. And all of those things can be very difficult when you are used to being the leader in every circumstance that you're in.
Right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Last of the three questions. How should whites go about finding out about the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color without burdening them to tell their stories over and over and over?
Yes. Oh, this is a great question. So there's a couple things at work here. And one of the things that, one of the ways, predominant ways in which white people experience race, sorry, my language is a little funny, y'all, because this is just hard stuff to give language to, right?
Right.
Is through relationships, right? So what a lot of white people immediately go to, and this, I've heard this in churches for like the last 15 years, right? Is after they have the racial reconciliation moment, after they have the MLK Day, what white people are told, like explicitly told to do, is to go find a person of color and become friends with them, right?
Okay.
Go find someone who's not like you and have coffee. Go find someone go volunteer at some place. Go to somebody else's church, right? But it's always about relationship, that a white person is now going to find their Black person, right? And now they're going to have this relationship together. And I would like to propose that there are far more harmless ways to go about learning about race, right? And those harmless ways are buying my book, right? Buying Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, right? That there is a body of work in which Black people have been writing, publishing their experiences literally since Phyllis Wheatley, right? That there is centuries long bodies of work in which Black people and other people of color are saying, here's my experience. So it isn't necessary, right, to go find the one Black person in your life and ask them to recount every terrible thing that's ever happened to them.
Right.
Right. And the truth is that it's become easier and easier as the years have passed, right? When I was in school, it was hard to find books by authors of color. Okay, I had to go into the hood. I had to find a Black-owned bookstore. I had to request it from the library because the library I had didn't necessarily carry it, right? Now you can hop on Google and you can get blogs, you can get videos, you can get essays and articles, you can, right? Like the access to information is tremendous compared to what it used to be, right? And so I think it's important for white people to acknowledge how much work has already been done, has already been given, and to access that so that when you come into relationship, come into contact with people of color or other marginalized groups, you're not starting at zero, right? You're not asking those people of color to give you the 101 version of race, right? You can actually interact with what they're saying. You can actually have a conversation about it, right? You have something to reply to. Oh, that reminds me of when I read Austin's book and she said ... right? That your foundation doesn't become people, right? You're not walking across people in order to have your own sort of attainment, right? You are accessing information that then allows you to form actual relationships, not a teaching relationship, right? Actual relationships with people of color in your life.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I will turn it back over to Carmen.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you, Dr. Austin. That's a prophetic word. That's a prophetic title.
I'm trying so hard, Carmen.
In your book, you have a chapter entitled Creative Anger, and you discuss your experience as a woman, a Black woman, and as a Christian. White people have discomfort with Black women when we get angry. When we express anger, that's for some white people, that's very discomforting. You know, that there's something about a Black woman asserting herself that is perceived as just another angry Black woman, and you know, all the rhetoric that goes with that. What would you say to our white sisters and brothers about that? About, you know, the idea of this angry Black woman and, you know, the validity or the myth of that?
So that, well, first of all, I can tell you something that makes me, this is a total tangent, Lord. Sometimes I have to remember these things are being recorded. But I shall say it anyway. That's how I feel inside, Carmen. One of the ways in which I can be particularly frustrated with white women is that to some degree, they experience both marginalization and power. They experience both, right? Because they're still women, but they also have access to power because of their whiteness, right? And this is one of the key things that I feel like white women, if they wanted to, right, could say, oh, I know how that feels, right? Because there are plenty of white women who also are expected to not become angry, or who are told they are too emotional, or who are belittled in their humanity, right? Who are belittled as women. And it just feels like such a good stepping stone to then understand what Black women are experiencing. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm trying to say. It just feels like a welcome stepping stone right there in front of us. But when it is happening, essentially what is being said to us is that there is no reason for the anger, right? That what we are doing is either acting, right, pretending to be angry, or that what we are doing is being overly emotional. So our anger might be real, but there's no cause for it, right? So that word just, we are just angry Black women, right? There's the emphasis is actually on just, that's all we are. And that there is no validity to that anger. While on the other end, white men can be angry all the time. And when they're angry, we call it visionary, right? When they're angry, we call it, they're calling us higher. They're calling us, they believe we can be better, right? That's why they're so angry, right? We understand that anger, but when it's Black women, we suddenly dismiss it. And what I am hopeful that as we have these conversations, that Black women will begin to realize that we are angry, but we are not just angry Black women, right? That we are angry for a reason. Audre Lorde says in Sister Outsider that my anger is instructive, right? My anger tells me that something is amiss here, right? My anger is pointing at something that we should be paying attention to. So am I an angry Black woman? Heck yeah. Yes, I am. I am angry about mass incarceration. I am angry about unequal education. I am angry about discrimination. I am angry. There's a whole lot of things I'm angry about. But I am not just an angry Black woman. I am angry for a reason. Right? And the power, one of the things that's powerful about anger is that it can call us to imagine something different, right? Anger says, here's the way things are, but here's the way they could be. And I am now going to set an expectation for the way they could be. There is power in the anger of Black women. Mm-hmm. And I think I could make a really good case for how the anger of Black women has made America more America than it ever wanted to be. Right? That the anger of Black women has changed so many laws, has changed so much policy, has changed the social structure of America, and that we are a better America because of the anger of Black women, even though that anger gets dismissed. Can I tell you one more thing, Carmen? Mm-hmm. You all have read the book, so you know this. When I was, I'll say a young adult, I really, really wanted to be that the angry Black woman who snapped her gum and who shook her head and who did this as she was talking, right? Who said, "What you not gonna do?" Or who started sentences with, first of all, what you not gonna do?" Right? I really wanted to be her. Right? And the reason I really wanted to be her is because some part of me wanted white people to be afraid of me. Some part of me wanted white people to walk on eggshells around me instead of feeling like they could say and do and treat me any old way. And I had to figure out what anger looks like for me, because it doesn't look like that. But let me tell you, Carmen, I appreciate that it does for some Black women. And often what we want to do is we want to say, okay, well, it's okay for Black women to be angry, but they have to be angry like Austin. Right? They're not allowed to use cuss words. They're not allowed to snap their gum. They're not allowed to use inappropriate English. They're not allowed to, right? That anger has to look like what Austin, it has to sound prophetic. It has to be wrapped in Christianity. It has to make me feel something, right? And what I wish is that we could hear the anger of an ordinary Black woman, the anger of a Black woman who works at McDonald's, the anger of a Black woman who has just been released from prison, the anger of a Black woman who is raising 4 kids, the anger of a Black woman who can't afford both groceries and to put her kids in daycare, the anger, right? I wish we could hear the anger of all Black women and not just the Black women that we like.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you.
Austin, this quote from your book is so very powerful, and from it, I'm again going to base a couple of questions on it.
Sure.
Here's the quote. When you believe niceness disproves the presence of racism, it's easy to start believing bigotry is rare, and that the label racist should be applied only to mean-spirited, intentional acts of discrimination. The problem with this framework, besides being a gross misunderstanding of how racism operates in systems and structures which are enabled by nice people, is that it obligates me to be nice in return rather than truthful.
Yes.
So first question is, how should white people understand and interact with this form of niceness in our society and within ourselves?
Yeah, white people have to stop with the niceness. You just gotta let it go, right? White allies must be more focused on being courageous than being nice. And often what white people want is to both be considered an advocate by me, right? They want Austin's stamp of approval, or whoever the person of color is in your life, right? You want that stamp of approval without making enemies. You still want to be liked. You still want to be invited to the potlucks. You still want to be invited to the sailboat and the picnics and the things, right? You still want the trappings of privilege, but you also want me to think of you as an ally, right? And that's really what the question of niceness boils down to, is that people only want to go so far in their pursuit of justice. And white folks have to be willing to release, right? To release the idea that they will still be likable by their peers and be considered an ally towards justice with people of color or other marginalized people. Because at some point you got to choose, right? At some point you're going to bump up against a system that says, are you with us or are you with them? And if you are still hung up on being nice, right? I know what you're going to choose. You're going to choose the system that benefits you. Carl, here's an example that I use a lot. Now, this is a pre-pandemic example, so my apologies, but maybe it is also happening via Zoom. The common experience of Black women is to sit in a conference room or a boardroom in which they are the only Black person in the room, right? And let's say it's time for Austin to stand up and to give her lecture, to give her presentation, to talk about an area that she is the expert in at the table. But before she can get her words out, right, she's got 5 hands going up who are questioning her credibility, who want to know where she heard that or where she read that, there's someone at the table who keeps saying, I think what Austin is trying to say is, right? She's getting cut off. People are interrupting her. And the nice person at the table who realizes what is happening, right? Who realizes that Austin is being treated differently because she is a Black woman. The nice person will scooch over and will whisper, can I get you a glass of water? Do you need a cookie? Would you like to go to coffee after this? You need a napkin, right? That's what the nice person is doing. The nice person is trying to remain likable by all the people in the room, but wants me to consider them an ally for being nice. What a courageous ally would do, right? And watching this unfold would be to raise his or her hand, right? And to say, hey, I am noticing that Austin has been interrupted 5 times in 5 minutes. We don't do this to anybody else. We don't do this to anybody else. Can we all take a step back, right? And listen to what Austin has to say and then ask questions, right? What someone who is courageous would do would say, hey, y'all, I think what Austin is saying is brilliant, but I'm having trouble because she can't finish her thought, right? Can we let her finish her thought, right? What someone who is courageous will do is to say, I don't give about whether or not everyone here thinks that I'm nice or likable. What I am going to do is create the conditions so that the Black people, the marginalized people around me are receiving equal treatment that we would give to anybody else in this situation. That requires courage, not niceness.
Thank you so much for that. Brief answer. We are approaching the 4:40.
Okay.
What is your call to action for nice white churches?
Ooh, whoa! This is the brief answer I'm supposed to give, Carl. That's not right. That is not right. I would say for churches, I think it's important to have a cause. And by that, I don't mean that you all call the legislature together and say, here's what the new policy should be, right? That's not what I mean. What I do mean, though, is are you committed as a church body to equal education? Are you committed as a church body to ending mass incarceration? are you committed as, right? Like, what is your commitment to justice as a church body? What are you committed to learning about? What are you committed to showing up to do? Does that make sense? There was a church, I think this church was in Chicago, but one of the things that they were really passionate about was immigration, because their church was located in a neighborhood that had a high number of people who are immigrants, recent immigrants. And so one of the commitments they made as a church was that anytime someone in their neighborhood was potentially going to be deported, the members of the church would show up at the hearing and say, this is an important person in our community. This is someone that we want to stay here. And advocate, right? Give testimony that potentially would change the outcome for families in their neighborhood, right? So what does it look like to show up as a church body that is committed to, right, something, some cause that you believe God has called you to?
Thank you so much once again. Okay, I guess that's transition.
Yeah, so
Reverend
thank you.
Jesse.
Thank you, Carmen, and thank you, Carl. That was wonderful. And thank you, Austin. I had to take off my sweater. I was getting real riled up as you were talking.
Listen, I have my fan on because I already know how I'm gonna get hot.
Yes. One of my favorite things we talked about this past year in an anti-racism series we did was to expect non-closure. I loved that with that last question Carl asked, like, as nice white churches, like we're never to have the expectation that like that one thing is going to fix it. So that really stuck with me.
You just keep working at it. You just keep working at it, which is why the passion is so necessary. Right? It's why the conviction is so necessary. It's why the commitment to learning more and more is so necessary, because at some point your church is going to be like, can we try something else? Because this ain't working.
This is not fun anymore. Yeah. Well, we've had a lot of questions filling up the Q&A. We also received a lot ahead of time. So I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, who is going to be culling through those and asking. And everyone who is watching, thank you for participating in the chat. Keep it up and keep sending us questions in the Q&A. That is awesome. We can see them coming in.
Yes, I am absolutely reading the chat. So it helps me feel connected to you all. So.
Yes. So Amanda, I will turn it over to you, and then we'll come back just before 5:30 and wrap up. So thank you.
All right, great. So yes, thank you for all the questions you have submitted, and we're not going to be able to cover all of them, but I hope that some of them can be combined at least, and we'll answer as many as, or have Austin, I should say, answer as many. I'm not answering questions here.
This is a team effort. Don't leave me, Amanda. Don't leave me.
I'm here. So let me pull up the first question I had, and it kind of circles back to a church's call to action. So this is from our audience, from Michelle. She says, or asked, I would love to hear your response to those who feel the church should not engage in political action. If you agree that the church has a role in our community's policy formation and change, what do you think is the best path for positive influence?
Yeah, to the first half of the question, I would say, get out of here, right? Do I think that the church should be like, should like have their faith statements, and then the last faith statement should be also, we're Democrats? Like, that might be going a little far, okay? I also think in some ways it's useless, right? Like, I don't think it's helpful. I don't like for whom, right? But do I think that the church should be involved in how we have, as a society, as a community, decided to structure ourselves? Yes. What else is the point of the church? I don't understand. Right? Why do you exist? We could just be on Zoom forever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what's the point of gathering? What's the point? Like, I don't understand. So all we're going to do is read scriptures to each other?
I think
right?
sometimes we do.
Right. And that's great. Like fortify one another. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But also if your church, right? If your church shut down today, if today was it, would it make any difference to the community? Would anybody care other than you?
Mhm.
Would anybody be devastated? Would any school, right? Would any school, would any teacher, would any nonprofit, like would anybody care? If not, I have questions, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I start with, what are you passionate about, right? I don't think it's my job to tell a church what they should be doing, right? Or even how they should be doing it. I really believe that the Holy Spirit can speak to you and can speak to your church and can speak through the marginalized people who are angry right where you live and can say, this is what we need. This is how you can show up for us. This is how you can move beyond volunteering and go chase what you say you believe about God. So do you believe that God would be comfortable with unequal education? Do you believe that God is comfortable with mass incarceration? Do you believe that God gives do you think that God cares about the borders that we have created and decided you are a citizen and you are not? Do you think God cares about that? Right? Tell me what you believe about God, and tell me what you believe your responsibility as a person who loves God is to the world. And you will be telling me what your role in your community should be.
Mm. Mm. That gives a lot for us to consider, right?
As it should, right?
As it should, and all the things you raised, how especially it seems particularly poignant that, you know, if the doors of our church were to close today, of any of the churches represented here, like would anyone care? Would the community be negatively impacted because of that? We have a question from Jacqueline. She was in one of our book groups on Wednesday nights, and she said, our conversation began scraping the surface of how we can continue to facilitate and support conversations in each of our own congregations to, as you phrase, finally choose to connect the dots.
Yeah.
In your professional experience in Christian organizations, what are attributes of groups that you have seen to be successful in creating a culture committed to connecting the dots and continuing to do so in all of their work in a holistic and enduring way?
Wow. First of all, I love this question. And my answer is twofold. I'm going to try really hard to remember both answers. The first is that, and as someone who really appreciates organizers, I hate to say this, but it is the truth. In my professional career, I can almost guarantee whether or not an organization is going to have a long-lasting commitment to justice based on whether or not the people at the top are in the room. Are the people who hold the most power in the room? Are they on board? Are they committed to learning? Are they committed to changing? If the top 3 board of trustee members who hold all the power and making decisions at your church ain't on board, you're probably going to leave. You know what I mean? Like, because it's only gonna go so far, right? Is the pastor on board? Is the whoever holds power, who holds influence, are they on board? I can guarantee if I go visit, so let's say a university, right? I go visit a lot of Christian universities. If at no point their president is in any workshop, any lecture, anything that I give, I already know the university is not serious about this. I know somebody is, right? But I know it's not the president. I know it's not the board of directors. I know it's not the trustees. So that's the first thing. Are those who have power and influence on board? And then the second one, see, I told you I was going to forget. The second one. Okay, give me 3 seconds. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'm sure it'll come back as soon as you ask the next question. yeah, it's not coming. I'm sorry, friends. I swear there were two, and all I got is, but yeah, it matters. It matters whether or not the people in power are actually on board.
Another question coming from Alicia. As Christians, we are often taught to call people in. However, Layla Saad discusses in her book, Me and White Supremacy, that calling in and calling out are both ways to call attention to problematic, harmful, and oppressive behaviors. Do you think there is space for calling out in Christianity? And if so, do you feel like the church as a structure should be doing more of it?
Wow. Well, I certainly believe in both calling in and calling out, right? And honestly, sometimes I'm not sure what the difference is, right? Because both are an opportunity for change, right? So I don't know if the language is a difference, or if there's a difference in relationship, or right, like I don't fully know what the difference is. But both, right, are an opportunity to say, oh, I need to do better. You know?
Yeah.
And should the church be saying we can do better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And not only should the church be saying we could do better, but it should also be making decisions that are better. Right. So I spent a lot of time in Chicago, y'all. I used to live there for 7 years. So I'm sorry, a lot of my examples are in Chicago. There's a church in Chicago, historically Black church. But the church didn't have enough members / enough funding to keep the church going, right? To keep the building going. And they shared space with 2 other white churches, predominantly white churches. And one of the white churches was struggling to figure out whether or not they should help the Black church, in addition to whatever money they were already giving, right? As a condition of their agreement, whether or not they should also help fix the roof of the church. And ultimately that white church said, of course we are, like, we're going to pay for it. Like, not only we're just going to help, right? We're going to do it, because this is where we worship too, right? And because of our commitment to this original church and to the people of it and to the community, the Black community around us, right? So the church must not only be calling in and calling out, but making sure that it is living up to its own standards, right? There are few things that bother me more than a church that pursues justice in the community, but the congregants, the people on staff, the marginalized people, the people of color are thinking about leaving. So you mean to tell me you could take better care of the community outside your doors, but the people inside of it are still experiencing injustice, still aren't being heard, still don't have positions of leadership, still aren't being promoted, that's a problem for me.
Yeah.
Right. So it would be nice if churches just did what they said they believed.
Think of the change we could.
It would be revolutionary.
Think of what that would look like if we lived out our gospel commission. So I'm combining a couple of questions along those lines. So in churches that are perhaps predominantly white,
Sure.
There's more white congregants than Black, more white employees, staff than Black or people of color. What can we do? One, it's a twofold question.
Sure.
To nurture and support them. And second, how can we start forming those actual relationships, those cross-racial relationships? That's more than just having coffee, as you mentioned before. So how can we, one, nurture and support, and then how can we actually form those relationships that matter and make a difference? Yeah,
that's good. So the first thing is to ask. Right? And we're really afraid of asking. And I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, I could make some guesses about why, but we need to actually ask. There are people of color around us, right, who may be itching for the opportunity not to be asked about the most horrible experience they've ever had, right? Which is what a lot of people are trying to get at, right? Tell me about your experience of racism in America, right? Like, what if instead of asking me to cut myself open so that you could like watch me bleed, what if instead you said, hey, I've been thinking about some ways that we could change our preaching. I've been thinking about some ways that we could change our music ministry. I've been thinking about some ways that we could change our outreach. I've been thinking about some ways that we could change our community. I've been thinking about some ways we could change our Bible study. What do you think? What do you think? Y'all, let me tell you, this is just one example. I really, really dislike predominantly white churches that demand that I be in a small group as part of joining the church, as part of being a member. Because y'all, I know some of y'all don't want to hear this, but I ain't trying to go to every white person's house. I don't know you. I don't know you. And I don't know you. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to be safe in your neighborhood. I don't know if I'm going to be safe in your house. I don't know who else is coming over. I don't know if I can eat that food. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Do you have cats in the house? Because if you have cats in the house, I might not be there. You know what I'm saying? Like, right? So before we institute a policy, right, that in order to be a member of this church, you must be part of a small group that meets in someone's house, right? Are there any other options? Has anybody asked Austin what she thinks about this? Realizing that Austin's experience might be very different from everyone else's. I know a couple churches who actually made the decision to ask people of color specifically how they felt before small groups were formed. And what those churches have done is decided that there would be small groups that also met at the church. Why? Because Black people love going to church. Okay, we will go for the revival service. We will go in the morning. We will go in the evening. One place we gonna be is in the church. So if the small group is meeting in the church, okay, in this neutral space where I also feel at home, right, and feel a sense of belonging, well, now we can talk about small groups, right? So the question really is, are you involving people of color? And here's what I'm gonna say, y'all, not having no secret white people meetings where the decision has already been made. And then you present it to the most marginalized and try to convince them that the decision you had already made is the best decision. No, when you are in process, when you are in process, are you bringing in voices of those who are marginalized to speak into how your church is going to be a church to everyone? And are you valuing that feedback? Or do you look at the numbers and say, well, you know what, 80% of the church said this, so that's what we're going to do. And dismissing, right, all the marginalized voices.
It's almost no point in asking if you're just not even going to.
There is few things more frustrating.
Like just like check off that box of like, oh, okay, we asked the question just to.
There are few things
better.
more frustrating, but churches have to begin to think about doing this differently, right? Because there are a lot of churches who do look at the numbers and say, great, here's the majority. We're going to do that, right? But that leaves out all the people of color who, and wonder of wonders, if all the people of color actually have the same answer and are like in agreement, that is a sign to the church, my friends, because we are not monolithic, right? So if a good chunk of the marginalized voices are saying, in order to move forward, all you got to do is have the small group at the church, that is a win.
Yeah.
Right? That is a win. Do that, right? But too often there are systems and structures in place in the ways that we already deal with making decisions that leave out those voices, so that even if you do ask, their responses get left behind.
Thank you. I had another question. I need to find it. All right. So this this is a request maybe to speak a little bit more.
Sure.
Something. So this comes from Jennifer. She says, the quote from your book that made me pause and reread multiple times and sticks with me today is, quote, "We have refused to honestly confront the fact that so many were willing to die in order to hold the freedom of others in their hands." She says, I don't know if I have a question, but I think I would like to hear you talk to how we can make sure in the environment when the definition of history seems up for grabs, how we can fight for a realistic view of the past and work for a better future.
Child, I don't know. I think, Carmen, this might go to your point that you were making earlier. I think one of the, this is so hard. I'm sorry, friends. This is hard because there are some things about America that have always been true, right? And to say that something is like a new phenomenon feels like, oh, but is it? Right? So let me say there seems to be a renewed endeavor, a concerted, vocal, public effort, right? To keep history as it once was, meaning that we don't talk about the Civil War as a war over slavery, meaning that in our history textbooks, those who are enslaved are referred to as workers, as if they were getting paid, right? That all the ways in which we have failed to teach history as it was, right? That there is now a renewed effort, right? To keep those old definitions of history intact so that we don't have to talk about what really happened in America, right? I don't know what we do about that, right? Because it's never been so, in my lifetime, it has never been so vocal, right? When I was a kid, what was happening is this war, so to speak, this battle was being waged in the history books themselves, right? It was being raised in the textbooks. And then what was happening like in the actual classroom was like, well, you know, we're going to add to this. We're going to insert some of this, right? And those are the schools that I grew up in, right? The ones who walked away from the textbook and said, we really going to talk about the slavery thing. Like, we really going to talk about Jim Crow. This 2 paragraphs on MLK, not good enough, right? But now there's a very public battle over what books are banned, what articles are banned, right? Banning the teaching of CRT, banning, right? Like it's a little overwhelming, honestly. But I don't know what else we can do other than to continue to say that's not historically accurate. I don't know what else we can do, right? I mean, I think we can continue to push back on the textbooks. We continue to call our schools, right? And say, I want more diversity. This is especially important if you're white, right? To be able to say that it's important for my child to have teachers, right? Who don't look like them, right? This isn't just like an important thing for Austin's kids, right? That this is important, period, right? So I think it's not that I don't think that there are things that we can do. I think we are going to have to be as creative and as vigilant and as outspoken as the opposition. That's what I think. But I think at the end of the day, we must continue to hold ground and say that is historically inaccurate.
I think a related question from the Reverend John. It seems like awakening to the realities of racism and gathering the resolve to act could be understood as religious conversion and spiritual practice. Do you have thoughts or counsel on how the church can engage with scripture, prayer, worship, etc., with an eye toward racial justice activism?
Yeah, so there's a little thing called the Black radical tradition. little thing called the Black radical tradition. And I think it holds a wealth of information on this, right? And not just the Black radical tradition, right? But other ethnicities, right? The theology from the margins, right? Theology from the viewpoint of women, theology from the viewpoint of immigrants, theology from the viewpoint, right, of all kinds of the disabled, right, all kinds of marginalized communities, that the white church has purposefully left out, right, has purposefully left out, and in the past, quite literally, right, we ain't doing that over here, you go from your own church. Right? That's how we get Black churches and white churches, right? Because white churches were like, you can't worship up here. At best, they were like, you could worship in the balcony, but most of them was like, you don't have a soul. So what exactly would be the point, right? So what would it look like to decide that that you are, as a congregation, right, that you are going to sit at the feet of the marginalized among you? Right? And how would that then change the structure of your church, the music of the church, right? I think there are a lot of possibilities for being instructed by the margins, again, as opposed to just asking them to cut themselves open, but to actually think of the margins as leaders, right? To think about it as leadership, to think of it as desirable, to think of it as holy, right? To think of the Black radical tradition and others as sacred, right? But that requires a pretty significant shift, honestly, away from white supremacy, away from this idea that what you learned in seminary or what you, right, whoever you read, right, has the best, right, holiest answer.
Yeah. We miss out on just the wellspring in the full of theology and what there is by limiting it to white males. Here's a question from one of our facilitators that submitted of the book groups. Black people and other people of color have a depth of knowledge about race and racism that most white people do not.
Right.
But it can feel like we are having the same starter conversation almost every white person we talk to. How do you avoid or minimize feeling burned out by the elementary level of the most well-intentioned discussions about race and racial disparities? How do we politely and kindly advise white people about the work they must do for all of us to move forward?
Yeah. So I've become real clear about who my audience is and who my audience is not. And when you become real clear, you start writing books where the first sentence is white people are exhausting. Right? You only do that when you're real clear that there are going to be some white people who put that book back down. Right? I just got an email the other day. I don't remember where she's located, but I just got an email the other day from a woman who said that her child's high school is working on banning I'm Still Here from their school curriculum so that nobody is allowed to teach it. And she was like, what do you think I should do? I ain't writing that woman back. I ain't writing that woman back because I didn't write that book for somebody who wants to ban it from the schools, who thinks that my book is a danger to students. Hope they find another book, right? Like, my book ain't the only one out there. It's not the only one out there, right? There are lots of books and resources that can meet you right where you are, you know? And so for people of color, what I suggest for them is that they begin to get real clear about what kind of conversations are generative, right? There was a point early in my career where I didn't mind answering the 101 questions, and it was generative for me. I felt great about it. The longer I have been in this career, the more I'm like, no. I can't spend not another second trying to convince someone that racial justice is something you should care about. If you got to be convinced, then here's a book, like, have at it. But that ain't what I'm going to spend my time doing, you know? Yeah, so I want people of color to be very clear about who and how that might change, right? That might change over time. But what are the generative conversations that you're having? What do those look like? And then the second thing is, what can you do to do your best to ensure that the conversation is generative? And what I mean by that is, if this is someone you don't have a relationship with, right? instead of accepting the coffee date, could you first send an article and say, hey, if you want to read this article, it's, you know, it's one that I care deeply about. It, you know, explains a lot. Read that and then come back to me and we'll have coffee. Right? So that there is homework that must be done. Because if you don't have time to read a 1,200 word article, you don't have an hour to talk to me. Right? So in what ways can you like be sure, right, that this is a conversation that the white person is invested in, as opposed to just sapping away your time and energy?
Yeah. I think connected with that, I'm going to combine another two questions. So as a member of the Black community who has gently and generously led conversation and exploration around the topic of race, how do you refill your cup, and what is bringing you joy?
Oh, I love this question too. I think it's, what was that word? Gentle? Is that what was used? That I'm gentle?
They said gently and generously.
What? I don't know that I've often been described as gentle, but I will take it. Well, one is honestly the answer that we just talked about, right? It's that these conversations give life to me, right? Because you're not asking me to like open, this is about to be my Bible, it's Post-its, right? You're not asking me to open up my Bible and be like, prove to me where it says I should care about racial justice, right? I don't want to do that. I could do that, but I don't want to. It's not generative for me, okay? This I could talk about all day long, right? You want to talk about how churches change their communities? I'm in, right? You want to talk about how this looks and how to practice racial justice and what it means to practice racial justice as a white person and how to be committed and how to stay passionate, right? Let's talk. I got all the time in the world for you. You know, I'm going to leave here and go take a walk around the block as opposed to taking a nap.
Yeah.
Right? I'm getting hot. I got the fan on, right? So part of it is becoming clear about the kind of conversations that I'm having. It's also being clear about the way I'm going to have them, because I am going to flip my hair over my shoulder. Yes, I am. Right? Everybody ain't ready for this. Every single one of you listening knows somebody who ain't ready for this, okay? Who would have turned off their computer 20 minutes ago, right? Like, who is this woman, right? So I'm very clear about how I'm going to show up. I am very clear about what kind of conversations give life to me. And honestly, I'm honored because I's getting paid, okay? Which is another important part of this, right? People of color, if you were getting paid to talk about your experience, paid to give your opinion, I bet you wouldn't feel quite so tired, right? So what does it look like to say that if you want my expertise, you can have it, but here's how much cash it's going to cost you, right? Yes, I would be happy to lead a workshop. What's the budget? Right? Yes, I would love to give my time to strategizing about this. I have 1 hour a week. If you want more than that, right? But I want people of color to value their experiences, to value their stories, to value the books that they've read, to value, you know, all that comes with understanding race in America. And that doesn't always mean just handing it out because somebody asked you to. Also, I recognize that though this is important work and it's good work and it's work that I love, I am more than my work, right? Yeah. So I take great joy in this new house. I'm a new homeowner. We've been here for about 6 months and I am so delighted. I'm so delighted. My little boy is about to turn 4. He is starting to put his little sentences together. He does not understand conjugating verbs. He doesn't understand what the heck a pronoun is. And it is so delightful. It's so delightful. He delights me. I watch a lot of Netflix, okay? I'm waiting for Netflix to come out with some new things because I have seen all the things.
Me too. We're on Discovery Plus now.
Right. I have had to expand my options. Okay. Right. But there are lots of things that I am doing, right, that is outside of the scope of the pursuit of racial justice, right? That's a part of what I do, but it is not the totality of who I am.
That's a good word. Boundaries, knowing your worth, your value, and that you are more than the work that you do.
You know, there are a lot of people who really struggle with boundaries. Like it's a whole thing, right? Like the publishing industry is like wanting more and more books on like how to keep and maintain boundaries. Child, my friends be like, Austin, could you have one boundary less? Right? My friends are like, is there a window to the boundary? Is there a gate? If we knock on the door, would you let us in? Right? I do not struggle with this thing called boundaries. I should teach a whole class on boundaries. Actually, maybe I shouldn't because it comes so naturally. Maybe maybe that would not actually be helpful at all. But I love me a good boundary.
All right. We have a question from Pat. I'll have two more questions. This is the second to last. Please speak about children or teens or adults who are biracial, multiracial. What are the challenges, joys, etc., especially knowing how the recent political climate has affected us, family, friends, divisions, etc.?
Wow. Well, once again, I am not multiracial or biracial. So this is, again, outside looking in, right? But I will say you all have read that story about Sankofa, right? And the crazy that happened on that 3-day trip. But what I didn't talk about in the book is that the reason I was on that trip was because my roommate at the time is biracial. And she had been raised by her mom. Her father, who was Black, had passed away when she was like 12 or so. And so she was raised only by her mom. And the Black side of her family had dismissed and disowned her and her brother because they were biracial. And so she had grown up in this almost sort of explicitly white context, right? And then she gets to college and she's got me as a roommate. And that was a little shocking to her system, friends. It was a little shocking to her system. But I, of course, won her over, Avi. And she heard about this trip. And she said to me, Austin, there's this trip that's like a 3-day bus trip through the South that's learning about Black history. And she said, I'm only going if you will be my partner. Because I'm not just going as like a white person, right? I'm going as someone who is realizing that she is a woman of color, right? That she is also a Black woman. And she was like, I don't trust just anybody, right, to walk me through this experience, right? And so the only reason I was on that bus trip is because of her, is because she was willing and interested and wanting to become a whole person, right? Not someone who is only defined by one side of herself. And she wanted to become comfortable. Poor thing. She is a biracial person that you can't quite place, right? So you look at her and you go, are you Indian? Are you Hispanic? Are you Black? Like, what's happening here? Right? She is not easy to place. And because of that, she gets racism over everything, right? So she'll be walking down the street and somebody will shout at her, go back to where you came from, go back to Mexico. And she's like, well, I'm not Mexican, but okay. Right? So it was important for her to come to terms with what it meant, not just to leave this all white context, but to be someone who is perceived, who is going to be treated as a woman of color, right? And I just offer that to say that it is a particular experience, right? Being biracial is a particular experience. Being multiracial is a particular experience. And it's one that I can't speak to any more than that, except to say that it's important to recognize that it is not the same as just sort of knowing that you are Black and that's the end of the story, right? Unless you are a biracial person who was raised that way, who is like, yeah, you biracial, but you black. You know what I mean? And that exists too, right?
Yeah.
But for anyone who has like had this dual identity, it's a very, very specific way of processing race, as is those who are people of color but have grown up in white households, right? Who are adopted into white households that didn't want to talk about race. That's a very specific racial formation that is happening, right? And so I just want to say that those are particularities, and it should not be assumed when you step into that. Nothing should be assumed.
Right.
When you step into someone trying to figure out their racial identity.
So my closing question from you that came from one of our facilitators, and I think a lot of us who have read the book or are present here today, after someone who has finished reading your book, what would you hope is their next step? What would you hope for us to do next?
Man, that's interesting. You know why that's an interesting question? Because when you're a writer, you kind of prepare for no one to read it. You know, like you have to be ready for it to, not to flop, but for it to like, is it okay? You know what I mean? Like, did I? As opposed to expecting that like tons of people are going to read it and be moved by it, right? I think this question is easier to answer for Black women because there's not much that I want Black women to do, right? I want them to read it and feel affirmed. I want them to read it and feel known. I want them to read it and know that they're not losing their minds, right? That they're not making it up, that they're not hallucinating, that they really have been experiencing what I describe, and that now they have language for it, you know? I envision Black women just like sliding my book across the table whenever someone asks them about their experience, right? They just be like, I ain't answering that, but if you really want to know, here's this book, you know? I hope, you know, my only conscious thought when it came to thinking about the potential for having white readers was that I knew, even as I was writing, right, when I was still like early in my speaking career, that there were white people who with sincerity would say to me, I can see injustice, I can see racism in mass incarceration, right? I got it. I can see it in an unequal education system, right? That there's a Black school and there's a white school. Like I got it, I can see it. But I am struggling to see what racist looks like where I work and where I live and in my family. You know what I mean? Like everybody seems so nice, right? But we're constantly talking about diversity right? So help me to see it right where I live. And that's what I really wanted to do with this book, is for the white people who are already invested, right? To not have to look far to be able to see how race is still at play right where you live and work and go to school and volunteer and so on and so forth. What you do after that, I don't know. I can't make myself responsible for that. I just can't. But I hope that you can see it now.
Yeah, become aware. Excellent. Well, thank you, Austin. And I'm sorry that there were a lot of questions.
I know, I'm sorry, friends. I'm not good at answering questions fast.
That's all right. So we apologize if your question didn't get answered, but thank you so much for the questions that you were able to answer.
Sure. My pleasure.
Wonderful. Well, just wanted to add one more note of gratitude to you, Austin. Thank you. This was so awesome. And I really hope you can come back in person. We're almost there, I think, at the pandemic, but show you around your old haunts and also feel your energy in person, because you definitely created it here in the Zoom room for us.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I truly would love to come back to Cleveland. I spent almost every summer of my childhood in Cleveland. So it genuinely is a place that I love, and I would love to come back.
And it is a good place to come in the summer.
Right?
So that was a good decision on your part as a kiddo. And I wanted to say also a special thanks to all of our congregations that came together, and for all of the congregants. I'm sorry, again, we weren't able to be in person, but thank you for participating in the chat, and to all the congregations for all the planning that went into this. So we'll have one more book group discussion this coming week to talk about what we've heard today. So I hope all those who are part of those groups will come to that last session. And that wraps up our time today. Feel free to stay around for the chat for a few minutes, but thank you so much, Austin, And thank you for guiding us and keeping it on. So thank you all. Happy Pentecost.